way for small business to sort of like reclaim that share by being more human, connect more with their audience, right?
Exactly. And I'm really glad you brought up Amazon and Walmart, because I like to call them the elephant in the room that we need to really be talking about. Here's the reality. When we think about what happens when you or I go to Amazon.com, we kind of know what to do, don't we? If you, I mean, this may not apply to everyone, but let's pretend that most of the people listening have at least done a fair amount of purchases on Amazon. They know the process. They get there, they look for their thing, right? And they find it. They know what what the orange colored button means, the add to cart, or buy instantly, whatever that's called. And then the checkouts are really seamless. And the reason I bring up all those little touch points is because that's what a small business is up against. And I don't say that to be discouraging, but I say it as kind of a benchmark for us to think about, that we are always in an e-commerce business, we're competing against these guys, right? Amazon and Walmart. And a lot of times we might, like, a business may have an amazing product that Amazon or Walmart can't compete with. They have something that differentiates them. And so that's good. But they need to think about, well, what is the experience of buying like over on a place like Amazon or Walmart? It's so easy for people. Like, it's a no-brainer. And if we want people to buy from us, if an e-commerce store wants someone, a small owner wants to buy from them, they need to do their best to try and make their own website and user experience as easy and as seamless as those bigger shops do.
Right. And I mean, let's break that down a little bit now, because that's a great point you brought up, right? Essentially, you're pointing to these guys as sort of like a gold standard. Obviously, there are things that small businesses can do differently because they're small, right? Like, for instance, Amazon has a huge problem because they've got probably millions of products, whereas maybe you've only got 500, so you can be maybe a little bit more focused than their site can be, so they can never beat you on. But there's clearly things which you've just pointed out on how Amazon does things very well that small businesses can emulate. So what are those areas that you think small businesses are not doing enough about?
Really good question. One of the areas that I see the biggest problem in is probably the most important part of a website, and that's your header. So what I mean by the header is the top part of your website where you're going to have your logo, your navigation. Sometimes you might have a search box, especially if your product catalog is bigger. And a lot of times I'll come across a small business website and the header design isn't as intentional or thoughtful as it could be. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of things that I see on headers that are a problem. So that if someone is listening and they have this going on their website, they could consider, well, maybe I need to revisit that and think about taking that off. So here's the first one is, let's say you decide you're going to put your About Us page as a link in the navigation. And if you think about it, the real estate is really contained up there. There's not a lot of space to work with. And if you're wasting a link on About Us, about your company, that's a link that could be instead encouraging people to go look at a particular product category. Now, I'm not saying do away with it completely. Maybe that has a home down in your footer. Or maybe, for the really small businesses that we're thinking about here who may only have 3 or 5 products in their catalog, and their whole positioning is about them as a homegrown company. Now, in that case, I could see that context. Well, maybe it makes more sense to have that About Us link in there. But for a lot of people with a bigger product catalog, something like a link like that, About Us, makes no sense. It's a wasted opportunity, right? You're sending people to something that isn't encouraging them to buy.
Right. Are you alluding to the paradox of choice, where you give people too many choices and they don't make any at all?
Well, I guess I am in a roundabout way. I like to steer people where we want them to go. And I'm glad you talked about choice, because that brings me to something that isn't in the header, but that I see as a problem on home pages a lot. And it's this. So I'm in a couple of Facebook groups that are for Shopify. And I see over and over people say, please review my site. And I go and look at the site. I don't review it. I just go look at it because I'm curious. And inevitably what's happened is I think they've probably decided to dip their toe in e-commerce. They've bought a bunch of products off AliExpress. And here's what's on the homepage. You've got like glue, nails, shoes, clothing. And it's like the whole hardware store there. None of the pictures look consistent, for one, okay? But also you're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at people to try and sort through.
Yeah.
My husband and I were just looking at a site today, like this for he's a miniature war gamer. So he's in this hobby and he was showing me this site where he's like, look at this homepage. There's 25 different hobby types here on the homepage alone, and they have no grouping. Like they aren't, say, grouped into categories like for the World War II lover or, for the Afghanistan,
Right.
So when we do that, when you have a homepage where you're kind of throwing everything at people, hoping that something sticks and it has no order or organization or grouping to it, people's brains, they're going to get overwhelmed. They're going to shut down. They're going to nope right out of your site and go somewhere else. Because it's like what you said. First of all, there's too much choice. All right. But the problem isn't that there's too much choice. It's that we're asking them to try and in their brains, like sort all these choices out and group them into categories that make sense. Right. And that's really fatiguing for people's brains.
Right. So it sounds like sort of the overarching theme of what you're saying is that people aren't keeping it simple enough.
Yes, exactly. And I understand. There was a point in my business, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, where I really struggled to simplify my messaging and what I did for people. And I had all this high level knowledge. And anyone listening to this, whatever your industry is, you have high level knowledge of your industry. And I thought that's what people want. They want all this really sophisticated stuff. And it took a long time for me to wrap my head around the fact that no, they don't. They're coming into your business with oftentimes a fairly low level of knowledge. And so we need to keep it simple for them. We need to consider the fact that they may have had a crazy day right now. During this time, they're juggling kids, they're working from home. They don't know what's going on for dinner. On any given day, they have so many things going on that when they come to a website and that website isn't keeping it simple for them, it's like one more piece of overwhelm in their life. And what I like to say is, where can you as an e-commerce business owner with your website actually be this breath of fresh air that simplifies everything for them, that makes it so seamless and so clear for them to get through. And it's just natural and easy and nothing's stopping them from browsing.
So what's a good, I think that's a really good point you made, right? So we've got that advice now, and I'm just trying to think in the shoes of someone listening in thinking, well, that sounds a little bit like my site. So, what should they do? What's an easy, because it sounds like to make it simple, you kind of need to think a little bit outside your shoes, because for you, everything looks simple because you know it so well. So does it make sense that they get someone to review it who isn't so familiar with their site, and then they sit with them? What are techniques that you can recommend someone listening in to try to find out which areas they need to improve?
Well, you just mentioned a great idea, and that is have someone that you have a trusted relationship with. And this is important because you want to have it be someone who isn't afraid to be, just honest and straightforward with you and isn't trying to please you, right? If you have a relationship,
and probably not your mom, because she's always going to say you're great.
Exactly. Your mom is going to think it's amazing because you made it. So you need this trusted person who will tell it to you straight. Okay. And what you might do is, it's one thing, this is a little challenging right now with this virus in the world, because what I would normally advise is, if you can do it, you want to sit down with them and you want to watch them try to get through your website. And you want to just kind of, you want to be like an observer and see where they get stuck And after a little while, you might say to them, why did you do that? Why did you go there? And putting yourself in a position where you're doing a lot of observing, asking questions, and listening for the things that come up, they're going to give you indicators about where things might be confusing on your site, or not just confusing. Let's say you know your whole site process from A to Z. You know how to
Yeah.
get from here to there, but you talk with them and you realize, hey, they are looking at this completely different than I am. They
Right.
don't want to go from A to Z. They want to go from A to K, or A to Q and then back to K.
Yeah.
And so just that alone, observing someone and asking questions, can give you a rich amount of information about how your website's being taken in by like an objective party.